Well, welcome to this episode of Spec Kitty Founder Tales. Spec Kitty is the missing layer between product planning and agentic coding, a spec first CLI toolkit that structures your AI development workflow before a single line of code gets written. And I'm joined today by my co founder and the brainiac behind Spec Kitty, Robert Douglas. Rob, thanks for spending some time with me.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Well, today we are talking about some of the trainings that you've done, who are in those trainings, and what you accomplished with Spec Kitty in those trainings. So, give me one example of who the attendees were, and what they did, and what the outcome was.
Sure, maybe even a little bit of history. So, Emmanuel, that you and I were involved in another venture together around a privacy tool, and I was trying to build that privacy tool as fast as possible. And I built Spec Kitty to help me build as fast as possible with as much accuracy and organization as possible, too, because I hate sloppy software and I hate disorganized software. And I was building Spec Kitty out in the open while building the privacy tool kind of behind closed doors. And people started noticing. I was posting some things on LinkedIn, of course, but people started really paying attention. And then I took the bold step of demonstrating it very spontaneously at a meetup in Cologne. And after that, things changed, really changed, because a number of people from that meetup then wanted me to come into their companies and train the developers in their companies on how to do agentic coding with Spec Kitty,
Hmm.
because they were certain that the direction of the industry was going towards agentic coding with Claude, Codex, Cursor, Copilot, whatnot, but they were unsure about the best way to roll it out for their development teams and how to do it in a way that didn't alienate or threaten the developers that they already had on their roster.
Yeah.
Now, these aren't people who were itching and keen to just fire all the developers and have one big black box in the middle of the room that takes your idea and spits money out the bottom. That wasn't their vision of how the things are supposed to work. They spent years building up development teams, development processes, workflows, continuous deployment. These companies had very stable customer bases. They were entrenched software products in hard to unseat industries, and they didn't have a lot of competition, but the competition that was there was gaining velocity and they could see it. So I started doing trainings, and this is what actually helped change my mind that you and I should be building Spec Kitty as a business, not the privacy thing.
Well, we
So
always
we
go
start,
where the market interest is, and since you
and the
were
market
able to
interest was
develop
there.
that, yeah, yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So training number one, that was already like 3 months ago. And that was a software development team that had a very established ERP system for emergency responders. That's
Mhm.
about all I should say about exactly who it was. We're under
Yeah.
NDA, but they were using a large monolithic software structure and 20-year-old code for their main product, and were under pressure to modernize. And they wanted to modernize to something like Symphony Framework and make things more microservice-y and adopt a decoupling between front end and back end. Very typical things for a software company to want if they'd been curating a monolithic 20-year-old dinosaur that hadn't really seen much upgrade but had seen a lot of technical debt added and layers on top of it.
Yeah.
And what they were noticing, and what a lot of these other companies were noticing, is that the percentage of time that was going to bug fixing and workarounds for antiquated software, that was going up, and the amount of time that the development team was spending actually bringing the product forward was going down.
Sure.
And they didn't feel like they had any choice but to accelerate the existing team, because while they're profitable and everything, they're not in a fast growing industry. So they can't make a plan to add 20 new developers to speed things up. That won't work. Agentic coding to the rescue. So I came in, and the training day has looked the same for almost everybody. Some companies take 2 or 3 training days, but if you condense it to one day, then it starts with me showing you what Spec Kitty can do, giving you some presentations to orient everybody in the room. Oh, you asked who's there. Very important. For this company, very first training day, CEO was there. CEO, founder of the company.
Wow.
CPO, Chief Product Officer, was there.
Okay.
Project Manager was there. All of the lead level developers were there, and several junior developers were there. So a room of about 8 or 9 people altogether. And in the morning, I gave the presentations and the demonstration of Spec Kitty, and we developed a Spec Kitty feature or mission right there on the spot with me using Claude Code, very simple, tic-tac-toe, a toy example just to show the process.
Yep.
And then we took a break for lunch. And after lunch, I had already instructed them to think about their backlog and to pick a feature out of their actual backlog that would be a good positive for them to have implemented, and something that would take longer than a day or 2 for a developer to do. And we're going to try and do that after lunch. So they came back with a 5-day ticket.
Wow.
They had done their backlog curation already, had estimated everything, and they estimated in days. So they pulled a 5-day ticket. They explained to me what the process would be, and we got Spec Kitty going on it. And the first magical moment happened in the planning. No, in the specification, because Spec Kitty is trained to interrogate you about the unclarities or uncertainties of your specification. If you don't tell it precisely, by its own definition of what precise is, and LLMs can be very precise,
For
if
sure.
you don't tell it precisely what you want done, then it's going to ask you questions until it knows what to do. So that involves Spec Kitty investigating your code base, building out its own mental map of what you've already got there, what the environment is like, what the deployment process might be like, and also what you want to build. And the first question came, and the magic alignment moment started. It took 45 minutes to get through that first question, because
Wow.
everybody had to think into it. Everybody had to fully think into what this mission was supposed to achieve. It said some things in the Jira backlog that they pulled it from, but what were those things really? And that's the work of a developer, usually. But having all those people on the phone was magical, because then the product owner had to chime in and say, but our customer feedback has indicated that maybe we should do it this way. And the other senior developers were like, historically, we've already done this and that should be the way it is. And the CEO is like, we're shifting away from all of this altogether, and the strategy says. And the junior developers were like, can somebody explain to us what that's all about? Because like we've seen that floating by for some time now, and nobody's explained it to us.
Right.
So all of the conversation that generated was the first magic Spec Kitty moment for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you're just in that planning, they paid for their training just in that one question, where they get alignment as a team.
I think so. I hope they feel that way too. But I locked in on that as one of Spec Kitty's greatest value adds, is the potential to build executive level alignment from the top of the team to the bottom of the team in a short amount of time, by asking leading, guiding questions through the actual use case of the software. So then Spec Kitty wrote the user stories, and it wrote all of the functional and non-functional requirements, which is what it does in the specification stage. And it moved on to the planning stage, asked more questions. We built more alignment. It took a couple hours to get through it all, and they read all of the specs and all of the plans and all of the tasks. And everybody was amazed that it even wrote end user documentation explaining how to test the stuff that we were about to build, because that's what Spec Kitty does. And then we set about the implementation review workflow. Now, these days, I use a skill in Claude or OpenCode or Codex to automate that, but we did it Spec Kitty implement, WP01. Spec
Love it.
Kitty review, WP01. We did that for all like 6 or 7 of those, and it took another 2 hours to get through it all. And at the end, they had something that they started to review. They started to get it built, because the build systems for these programs that are that old, they're quite extensive. And sometimes it takes an hour to build the program. So you don't always even get to see right away what you've done. But they had a feeling for how much of it was going to work and how much they had forgotten to tell Spec Kitty about how they do things. For example, there was one way of passing like a factory class around through the software, and they used a certain type of registry for that. And Spec Kitty with Claude had done it a different way. The different way worked, but they didn't want to introduce a second paradigm into their code. And they were like, well, now we know we need to build that into our charter so that the charter gets read every time. And this is what the Spec Kitty development lifecycle is all about. It's about reviewing the results of what has been built and thinking what went well and what didn't go well, and the things that didn't go well, can we put things into the charter so that the next time Spec Kitty follows the charter and does a better job. And in fact, that's what they did. And I'm still in communication with them, and they're looking forward to trying TeamSpace. So they did a 5-day ticket in 4 hours.
Well, that's a pretty good lever, isn't it?
Yeah, I think 3 years ago, if I had gone to an investor and said I was going to make software development worldwide 10% faster, they would have given me billions and billions of dollars. If I had gone to them and said, hey, I'm going to take 5-day tickets and condense them to 4 hours of development time, they would have laughed at me.
Yeah, you would have been in the loony bin for sure. Well, so that kind of leverage, a lot of it is also from the specification work that's happening in advance, right?
Yes, and to be fair, teams have always tried to specify what they want in their backlog as well as they can. The Scrum process itself has a very thought-out process. Domain-driven development has a very thought-out process that humans are meant to follow for decomposing a change request or a feature request or a functionality request for software into all of its logical boundaries with the contracts between the different parts, so that you can develop the parts independently, and as long as they adhere to the contracts, they work together. And then the process of decomposing that into actual implementation details and the guardrails that are needed for testing each of those in part, unit tests, and in a whole, integration tests, end-to-end tests. The problem is that humans are always pressed for time, a tiny bit lazy, and not perfect. And the LLMs, not that they're perfect, but they're not lazy, and they go so fast that time becomes a different dimension. I mean, the leading questions about the specification and the plan are critical in the Spec Kitty process for getting a good result. That's where the humans have the most leverage to really think into it and align what they're seeing the intent of the LLM to be with the intent that they had. So the LLM's telling me it's going to build an airplane with 8 wings. Wait, what? 8 wings? I didn't want 8 wings. I very clearly specified no more than 4 wings. So you got to catch those things, or you'll end up with weird airplanes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so then also in that first training, then you got a lot of ideas and motivation for what the product roadmap of Spec Kitty is going to be.
Oh, absolutely. And we encountered bugs, and I fixed one of the bugs at lunch and had them redeploy. And I fixed the rest of the bugs that we found overnight. And we made a new Spec Kitty release that they then went forward with, because amazingly, despite all of the efforts that I've made to be a perfect software developer myself, if you then go into different environments with different machines and different operating systems and different programming languages, different tool sets, different CI/CD workflows,
Yeah.
sometimes things break. So these trainings, and now that I've done, over a dozen of them, have been absolutely spectacularly invaluable towards making Spec Kitty a product that actually fits inside of serious software development teams, brings them along into the age of agentic coding without stepping on their toes or their egos or threatening their jobs, and works on pretty much everybody's systems now.
That's amazing. So then, what was the next training that you did after that?
Well, it got better. So the next training was an even older, more entrenched software, same stack, incidentally. And they got really ambitious. I encouraged them. I was like, okay, we did a 5-day ticket in 4 hours. Let's go big today. Let's pull, after the training where nobody's used Spec Kitty before, let's pull one of the biggest tickets out of your backlog and see if we can do that. How long is that one meant to take? They were like, yeah, I think that our best developer would need 10 days for it all. A day to research, a day to get set up, a couple days to implement, a couple days to test, and a day or two to get through the acceptance procedure with all of the stakeholders.
So 100 human hours is what they're estimating on this one, roughly.
You think Europeans work 10 hours a day?
I would hope so.
Well, it is, because it's not just the one developer. It's like the other people on the team that he's pushing.
Right.
They're pushing things off to the product manager and to the design team and to the business analyst who has the customer relationship, and maybe the customer has to take a look too. So it could be well over 100 hours for a 10-day ticket. Anyway, we did the ticket. It specified, planned, implemented, and merged all of it. It took a little bit longer. We had to go an hour extra in the training. By the end, it was me and the lead developer and the CEO or somebody like that on the phone. And we were a bit tired, but it did the whole 10-day ticket. It was we got off the phone really fast. I don't think they adopted that code as is for similar reasons as the first team. And that's when I learned that to do the very first mission perfectly, Spec Kitty needs a little bit more work building up your charter, and a little bit more interrogation around what your preferences are, what your working style is, what the code guidelines are for your stack, what your vocabulary is. When we say this, do we mean that, or do we mean the other thing that it could mean, or something totally different?
Yeah.
So since then, and throughout all the other trainings, which are all very similar, we always complete a multi-day backlog ticket of real software development after lunch, basically. And it's worked every time. And I've progressively pushed Spec Kitty in that time to do more and more of that upfront work, building the charter, building a glossary of the terms that are involved in your software development process. So when we say that thing, we know that we mean that thing and not the other thing every time.
Love the specificity of that. So
Spec-kitifficity of it.
Yeah, the ontological
Did you say tail?
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Oh boy, let's get off of this topic. Let's see. So, all right. So then you took a 10-day ticket, but that you're not sure that they ended up adopting it. But how about a training after that? What did you see?
There have been a number of trainings where the question out of the box wasn't how are we going to adopt agentic coding? It was, can we adopt agentic coding? And some of the use cases there and the challenges that have faced some of these companies are different. I've encountered a few companies now that use very old or extinct programming languages to build their software. What do I mean by extinct? I mean proprietary languages that are no longer supported by their vendor,
Wow.
or proprietary languages in particular of any kind that have relatively small audiences compared to, say, PHP or Java or Python or Node.js,
Yeah.
and where presumably the training data that an LLM like Claude Code or like Opus or GPT-5.4 from OpenAI presumably wouldn't have had nearly the volume of public training data for a language like that they would have for a Python or a Node.js or a Java, because GitHub is just not full of examples of these proprietary training languages, so they can't train proprietary programming languages, so they can't train the models on them. So their first questions to me have been, do these models even work on our stack? Next question is, we've got 2 to 3 million lines of code. Nobody's counted recently. How much is too much and too big? Next question. We can't send any data out of the European Union. Can we even do agentic coding if our code can't leave the EU? And there have been some other questions. We only develop in a VM. The developers can only use a remote terminal on a VM to do their development. Can we still use Spec Kitty? So, I mean, we've worked through all of that. To all of those questions, I can tell you definitively the answer is yes, you can still do agentic coding and you can still use Spec Kitty. It's worked every time, sometimes with more or less effort, but we can go through them. So proprietary or old or esoteric languages are not much of a problem. The models look at the example code that you have, see what training data they do have, and they usually have some, and then they extrapolate what they know about how computers work, and they just do it. They're probably not going to do something that you've never seen before that's not already in your code base, but most of writing code is actually extending or repeating patterns that already exist. So it works. And it especially works in the case where you're doing a migration from one language to another. So if Spec Kitties and the models are looking at an old, extinct, or proprietary language and migrating that to something it knows well, that goes particularly well because the target language is well covered by the training data.
Sure.
The second bit, the lines of code, that also is not such a problem because if you've got 2 million lines of code, you don't need, and if you've done your job right, you don't need to know all 2 million lines of code to change one line of code. It's not like that. You've got subsystems, you've got modules, you've got class structures. What you need is the blast radius of a change, and the models can find that pretty well by tracing the code backwards and getting a broad overview of the architecture, looking through a call stack to see who calls what, where, when, and why. What's the data flow through the call stack? They can piece all that together and make a model of that in their electronic brains at blinding speed. Yeah. And what my experience has been every time is the developer who's been there for 30 years and calls it my code because they've been writing it for 30 years. They're in the room and they're looking at it and it's like, oh, it found the whatever, or it noticed that we do that thing. And it's kind of fun because like the joy and wonder of coding comes back into these like ancient developers who are wizened and battle hardened and have been doing the same job for 30 years. They're all of a sudden like, ho, look at that. Wow. And they lean in, you can see the spark in their eyes.
I bet, and they're thinking, oh, I can finally take on this big project that I've been thinking about but haven't wanted to crack all these
And
years.
retire.
Yeah,
I can finally retire.
yeah,
That's
right.
what they're thinking.
There we go. I love it.
The next question that those companies had, this is specific for European countries, companies inside of European countries who have data restrictions, who don't want to send data to, for example, the United States or outside of the EU. For inference, especially their code. There are European inference providers who give strong European grade compliance guarantees about the safeguarding of your data, and then can run very capable models for you that you can do inference on. Will you get Claude Code? No. Will you get Qwen 3.5 with the 120 billion parameters at 8-bit fidelity? Yes. So these are very capable models that can be run, and you can definitely do the agentic coding at a high level with the inference providers that are available in Europe. Is it the world best cutting edge? No.
But it's compliant. That's what the critical thing is.
And it will give you advantages and velocity without question.
All right. Well, that was there one more question after that you solved? For these old
In
businesses?
virtual machines, for example, yeah, Spec Kitty running in virtual, yeah, it's just a matter of setting up the machine, and then it's no problems. So Spec Kitty's really designed to be very lightweight to integrate. It's a CLI tool. It's got a number of commands that the LLM calls, and then it's got skills and command prompts that tell the LLMs how to use those calls to get the job done. And then you're doing it the Spec Kitty way. So you tell the LLM, hey, use Spec Kitty specify. It reads the command prompt and says, oh, to do that, I have to set things up. So it calls 3 Spec Kitty commands, sets things up, and it says, okay, let's ask you some questions. Should it be red or blue? Should it be square or round? You answer the questions, and it says, okay, now that I've got the questions, I've got to call these 3 more Spec Kitty commands to get these other things done. And that keeps everything on track. But that means it's so lightweight to integrate. If you can install a Python program, you can use it in every case.
Well, so then just give me the high level overview about where the product is today and where you see it in 30 days.
Sure. So what we're sailing towards is a TeamSpace online experience if you choose that. The CLI will stay free, open source, and has no requirement to connect to our service. So you can keep using it as you are if you're not interested in what we're building. But the TeamSpace Online is going to give you the ability to see an overview of the relationship between your project on GitHub versus my build of the project versus your build of the project, and see which Spec Kitty missions and other changes are in flight right now before they even hit GitHub. And so that's like a product owner level visibility. It's also very good for coordinating between developers who's doing what and when. That's part of it. The next part of it is to be able to connect to Jira or Linear and be able to pull tickets into Spec Kitty's process from there and keep them synchronized between each other. So I can start my Spec Kitty specify by saying, hey, give me that Jira ticket I've got about, fixing the drop down. Okay, and it goes and it gets that. You mean this one? Yeah, that one. So it pulls it in, then it starts the process and asks you questions and builds the plan, tasks, and you implement it. And all the while, it's keeping Jira up to date.
Nice.
And then the last part of what we're putting in TeamSpace for the initial launch, which is your 30-day question, is the ability to open up a communication channel and talk about these decision-making points. So if I've got to decide what are the options in the drop-down, should the button be red or blue, or should it be round or square, then I can say, this affects more people than just me. I don't have the answer. Let's open up a Slack channel or go into the Slack channel we've dedicated for these discussions and ping the people in my team who are in the RACI chart for being accountable, consulted, and informed on this decision that I'm responsible for.
So you're taking, it sounds like you're making this into a communication tool that's a dynamic communication tool. So it's not just planning it in the beginning and then pushing it out. It is planning, letting the developers do the work, and then communicate with the rest of the team as they have questions before they're able to finish their part of the project.
Yeah, there's a strong real-time element to it because the human in the loop, the human in control is factually pretty much the breaking, slowing factor in agentic coding. If we could perfectly express everything that we wanted Claude Code and Codex and Cursor to build, they would just go and do it, and the speed would be simply pretty much linear to the number of processes you were able to start on it to do it, to be a watcher and a watcher and a watcher and so forth. Over the various agents doing things. So it's still going to take some time, depending on how big it is, but it's going to be a million times faster than a human coding it. And if you could express it perfectly, it would do it from start to finish in one go, and you just have working software every time. So the human in control is the bottleneck, expressing what they want precisely, making decisions that their previous instructions left open and unclear, and making those decisions so that the LLM locks down the parameters and the contracts and the edges and the domains, all of that. That has to be done with a human, and sometimes one human isn't enough, and Spec Kitty Teamspace is meant to solve that problem.
Sounds good. That's exciting. I'm curious to know what your how many computers you're running and how much how many tokens you've spent on getting to this point.
Oh, that's a hard question. So I'm currently running two computers. One's a MacBook Pro, about 3 years old, and one is a new MacBook Studio with an M3 chip GPU in it and 256 gigabytes of RAM. And that's the interesting one, although it's contributing the least. Right now, main Spec Kitty development happens on my laptop with Claude Code and the Codex desktop app and the Codex CLI, and sometimes Gemini, and sometimes Quen, and sometimes open code using various models. And part of that is because as the Spec Kitty maintainer, I have to try out a whole bunch of, and GitHub Copilot's there too. We're paying for that. In case you see the bill.
Oh, good. One more SaaS bill.
Yeah. So I have to try all these things out because Spec Kitty works with all of them, and I need to prove that it works with all of them. But also because the more different points of view and slightly different approaches towards agentic coding that these tools take, if I turn them on each other in a supportive role, or one could say adversarially, then you get a better product. So like I never have Claude implement anything that Codex doesn't review, or vice versa. So back to the interesting computer, the big box back there, I'm currently running OpenClaw, Hermes, and OpenFang as three different always looping agentic frameworks that are supposed to progressively learn and progressively do long-term tasks. And they're doing a couple things. They're maintaining the Rust port of Spec Kitty, which, if it works right in the future, would then supplant the Python port, because then I would more easily be able to do Windows and Mac installers that people who don't like the command line quite as much could then install and benefit from. Plus,
That's
I really
what I'm
like.
looking forward to.
Yeah, I know you are, and I really like Rust as an LLM language because it's got such strong compile time guardrails for quality, and it's fast. So they're making the Rust port of Spec Kitty. We'll see. I should say that LM Studio on the Mac Studio, that LM Studio is one of the 2 or 3 ways that you can run inference on your Mac. It's running a Quen 3.5, what is it, 20 billion parameter coding model. And that's what the Claw, the Fang, and the Hermes are all talking to for most things. But for the Rust tasks, the agents then actually use Codex and Claude and open code using state-of-the-art models to write the Rust code. So they're just overseeing the process. But some other things that they're meant to be doing that they're doing with varying success that are only using the Quen model, so only local inference, no cloud bill for these, are competitive research for Spec Kitty, and I'm building an investor list as well because
Very
we're
nice.
going to be fundraising in the future, and I want a really up to date. We fit their thesis. They've got capital to deploy investor list that we can then contact when it's time.
Yeah, in the very near future, because one man and 3 computers is not nearly enough to develop such a robust product. So we're going to need to get some help on the dev side for sure. That way you can go to choir practice once a week.
Oh yes.
Well, that's good stuff. So have you been able to use and be throttled on any of the platforms by using too many credits?
Oh, well, given that I'm sitting in front of my computer 10 to 14 hours a day, running as many as 6 to 10 simultaneous processes, I managed this week to get to the limit of both my Claude Code max plan and my OpenAI max plan. And then I shifted over to my local model doing inference, so I can sit on my MacBook Pro and open code, and it talks to the Quen 3.5 that's on my Mac Studio over the network, and that's pretty cool. I can even leave the house and get off my home network and still do the inference from my Mac Studio sitting on my desk. That's really great.
Yeah.
So yes, I flirt with the limits all the time. And it feels like the boundaries are getting more narrow, like they're restricting more and more how much you can use in a week or in a month, thus necessitating more solutions, especially like the ones that can run on a desktop machine that you've got sitting right in front of you, where the cost is up front. Because
Right.
I don't know, if I start going on OpenRouter to do the inference, and I'm doing real heavy Claude Code or Codex sessions. With that, Claude Code doesn't. They've turned that off recently. Then I can be spending $100 an hour in inference, and
Yeah. That
at
stacks
that
up quick.
point, you can budget for a pretty beefy machine sitting on your desktop.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's good. Anything else that you want to talk about that has happened or transpired this last week?
No, nothing comes to mind. How about you?
Oh, I'm wondering. Yeah, at some point it'd be fun. Maybe next week we'll talk about the team and about the other people who are supporting
yeah.
Spec Kitty in some form or fashion, and
Get them on the show
network
too.
yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I'd love to have them on the show. At least we could talk about them and have a little thank you show to the people who are working on our behalf because of the love of the product. So
Yeah.
sure. I love that you spent some time chatting about this, Robert. I appreciate it, and looking forward
Always fun.
to sometime later this month when we have the team space going and we can do a product reveal episode.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, I'll let you get on with your evening, and this is the Spec Kitty Founder Tales and number 3. So we're marching forward one step at a time. Thanks for joining us.